The Emerald Sword. Beneath the towering canopies of the enchanted forest, young Sir Alric tread carefully, his polished armor muted by the dim, green-tinged light filtering through the leaves. His quest, whispered of only in the most ancient tomes, was to find the Emerald Sword, a weapon said to hold the power to unite kingdoms, or destroy them. The map he carried led him to the heart of the forest, where the roots of a massive tree twisted together to form a natural altar. Embedded in its core was the sword, its blade shimmering like liquid crystal, and its hilt carved with runes that seemed to breathe with an inner glow. Alric reached for the sword, his gauntleted hand trembling. As he grasped it, the forest around him stirred. Vines slithered, animals paused mid-motion, and an ethereal voice echoed, "Who dares awaken my power?" Alric dropped to one knee, answering with reverence, "I am Alric, son of no great name, seeking the strength to protect the weak." The voice, neither approving nor condemning, warned, "The sword amplifies the heart. Wield it wisely, or it will undo you." With a deep breath, Alric drew the blade free, its radiance illuminating his path forward. As he journeyed back, Alric stumbled upon a scene of turmoil. A band of brigands had cornered a merchant and his young daughter, demanding their coin. The emerald sword pulsed in his hand, eager for battle, its energy filling him with the promise of invincibility. But Alric hesitated. His newfound strength could obliterate these foes, yet the power felt intoxicating, almost dangerous. Instead of charging in, he sheathed the sword and confronted the bandits with only his wits and courage. His calm authority and tactical skill disarmed the threat without bloodshed, the brigands fleeing into the shadows. As the merchant thanked him, Alric felt the sword hum faintly at his side, as if approving his restraint. He realized then that the weapon was not merely a tool of conquest, but a mirror of his soul. He could feel its potential to corrupt or to guide, depending on the choices he made. The forest seemed to whisper as he departed, its ancient voice now tinged with respect. Alric returned to the kingdom not as a simple knight, but as a man who understood the weight of power and the responsibility it bore. Whispers of his deeds traveled faster than he could. Alric, the knight with the emerald sword, became a beacon of hope and fear alike. Yet his journey was far from over. The visions granted by the sword hinted at darker forces stirring in the far corners of the land, forces only he might stand against. As he gazed at the distant horizon, Alric felt the pull of destiny, an unwritten saga waiting for his steps to shape it. In the days that followed, Alric began studying the runes carved into the hilt of the emerald sword, consulting every sage and scholar willing to speak of its history. The blade, he learned, was no mere artifact of war. It was forged centuries ago by an order of mystics who sought to balance the powers of creation and destruction. Each rune symbolized a virtue: courage, wisdom, compassion, and humility, qualities required of its wielder to maintain harmony in the realm. Late one evening, as Alric pondered the cryptic inscriptions, the sword began to hum with an almost musical resonance. Shadows in the room shifted unnaturally, coalescing into the shape of an elderly figure clad in robes of starlight. The apparition introduced itself as a keeper of the blade. "Alric," the figure intoned, "you have taken the first steps on a perilous path. The sword has chosen you, but your trials are far from complete. Beyond the forest, in the desolate northern wastes, an ancient darkness awakens. The emerald sword must be wielded against it, but only if you are truly ready." The keeper's words weighed heavily on Alric. He questioned whether he had the strength to face such a challenge. Memories of the merchant's terrified daughter reminded him why he fought, not for glory, but to shield those who could not protect themselves. Steeling his resolve, he vowed to prepare himself for the journey to the northern wastes, knowing that failure could doom not only him, but all who depended on the light of hope he now represented. As days turned to weeks, Alric gathered allies. The steadfast warrior Bryn, his closest friend since childhood, pledged her axe to his cause. The elven archer Lyrian, with eyes as sharp as her arrows, joined them, seeking vengeance for her forest kin slain by the same darkness they now faced. A mysterious mage, cloaked in shadow, offered his knowledge of the arcane, though Alric harbored doubts about his true motives. Their journey began at dawn, the first rays of sunlight gleaming off the emerald sword as it hung at Alric's side. Villagers lined the road, offering blessings and prayers for their success. Alric, though humbled by their faith in him, could not shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. The keeper's warnings echoed in his mind. The sword amplifies the heart. Alric knew he would be tested again and again, not just in battle, but in the quiet moments when choices carried consequences far greater than any blade could resolve. As the company disappeared over the horizon, the forest whispered once more, the ancient voice speaking words heard by no one but the wind. He carries more than the sword. He carries the fate of the world. The northern wastes proved as harsh and unwelcoming as the legends foretold. Bitter winds tore at Alric and his companions as they traversed jagged cliffs and endless plains of ice. Despite their growing exhaustion, Alric pressed forward, driven by visions that came to him in dreams, fragments of a vast shadow unfurling across the land, extinguishing the lights of towns and cities. Each step closer to their destination deepened his sense of urgency. One night, as they camped beneath the skeletal remains of a long-dead forest, the mage who had introduced himself only as Kale approached Alric. "Do you trust the sword?" Kale asked, his voice low and measured. Alric glanced at the glowing runes on the hilt. "I trust myself to wield it responsibly," he replied, though the words felt hollow even as he spoke them. Kale nodded, his expression inscrutable. "Be wary, Alric. Power as ancient as this blade often serves purposes beyond our understanding. It may demand more of you than you realize." The next day, the party reached the entrance to a massive cavern that yawned open at the base of an ice-covered mountain. Strange symbols etched into the stone seemed to pulse faintly, as if alive. Lyrian, who had been unusually quiet, spoke up. "This place reeks of death. Whatever lies within, it's waiting for us." Bryn tightened her grip on her axe, her steely gaze meeting Alric's. "We've come too far to turn back now." Alric nodded, drawing the emerald sword. Its blade ignited with a brilliant green light, illuminating the cavern's depths as they descended into the unknown. Deep within the heart of the mountain, they found the source of the darkness, a colossal entity bound by chains of light. Its form was amorphous, shifting between shadow and flame, its voice a cacophony of whispers that clawed at their minds. The creature, which called itself Maltheron, claimed to be one of the ancient beings the emerald sword was created to seal away. "Release me," it urged, "and I will share power beyond your wildest dreams. Together we could remake the world." Alric hesitated, the sword vibrating violently in his grasp as if sensing his doubt. Maltheron's words were tempting. With such power, he could end suffering, protect the innocent, and unite the fractured kingdoms. But at what cost? Bryn's voice cut through his thoughts. "Alric, don't listen. This thing is evil. Can't you feel it?" Kale stepped forward, his eyes glinting with an unearthly light. "Perhaps evil is necessary to destroy greater evil," he murmured, a hint of eagerness in his tone. Alric faced a choice that would define not just his journey, but his soul. He took a deep breath, letting the sword guide him, its hum aligning with the beating of his heart. "No," he said, his voice steady. "I will not sacrifice the world's freedom for my ambitions, no matter how noble they seem." With a mighty swing, he plunged the emerald sword into the ground, activating the runes carved into the cavern. The chains around Maltheron tightened, their light intensifying until the entity's form was consumed in a blinding flash. When the light faded, the cavern was silent, its oppressive darkness lifted. Alric fell to his knees, the weight of his decision heavy on his shoulders. Lyrian helped him stand, her expression one of quiet admiration. "You chose wisely," she said. Kale, however, looked at him with a mix of disappointment and curiosity. You've made your stand today, Alric, but the path ahead will demand even greater sacrifices. As they emerged from the cavern, the first rays of dawn broke through the clouds, painting the snow-covered land in hues of gold and pink. The emerald sword hung at Ulrich's side, its light subdued but resolute. He knew their victory was but a single chapter in a longer story. The forces of darkness were not so easily vanquished, and greater trials awaited. For now, though, Ulric allowed himself a moment of peace, his gaze fixed on the horizon where his destiny still called. The journey back from the northern waste was fraught with challenges, though none so dire as Maltheron. The land itself seemed to test them. A blizzard nearly buried their camp, while the frozen rivers threatened to give way beneath their feet. Yet the party endured, each trial forging their bond stronger. Ulric felt the weight of his decisions more keenly than ever, the sword's presence at his side a constant reminder of the choices yet to come. One evening, as they rested in the foothills south of the wastes, Ulric sat alone, staring into the flickering firelight. The emerald sword rested across his knees, its runes dimly glowing as if alive. Kale joined him, his shadow stretching long in the firelight. "You've seen now what this world hides," Kale said, his voice quiet but heavy with meaning. "The darkness is vast, and the sword is but one piece of the puzzle. Do you ever wonder why it chose you?" Ulric turned the blade slightly, watching the runes dance in the light. "Every day," he admitted, "but if not me, then who? Someone has to stand against this tide." Kale's eyes narrowed. "And what happens when the tide becomes a flood? When sacrifice is the only option? Will you wield the sword then, knowing it might cost you everything?" Ulric didn't answer, but his silence spoke volumes. Their return to the forest kingdom was met with a mix of relief and unease. News of Maltheron's attempted resurgence spread quickly, and Ulric's name was spoken with both reverence and fear. The king himself summoned the knight and his companions, offering rewards and titles for their deeds, yet Ulric refused all but provisions for the road ahead. "This is not the end," he told the court. "The Emerald Sword's light may have banished one shadow, but there are more lurking beyond the horizon. We must be ready." Lyrian and Bryn stood by his side, their loyalty unshaken. Kale, however, grew increasingly distant, his cryptic words hinting at a path diverging from the group. "I have my own destiny to follow," the mage told Ulric one night before quietly slipping away. Ulric watched him go, feeling both relief and trepidation. Kale's knowledge had been invaluable, but his ambitions were an enigma, and Ulric couldn't help but wonder if their paths would cross again, this time as enemies. As the weeks passed, Ulric began training others, sharing the lessons he had learned with those willing to fight for a brighter future. His companions helped him build a network of allies, a coalition of knights, scholars, mages, and common folk who believed in the cause. The Emerald Sword, though powerful, was not the sole key to victory. Ulric understood now that unity, courage, and the will of many could wield a strength greater than any artifact. Visions from the sword grew more vivid as time went on, showing glimpses of a shadowy council plotting in the ruins of an ancient city. Ulric recognized the place as Velthar's Hollow, a long-forgotten stronghold said to be the birthplace of the first great evil. The council's members were cloaked figures, their voices indistinct, but one thing was clear. They sought to unearth an even darker force than Maltheron. The night before setting out for Velthar's Hollow, Ulric stood at the edge of the forest, gazing at the stars. Bryn approached, her hand resting on her axe. "You're quiet tonight," she said. Ulric smiled faintly, just thinking about what lies ahead. Bryn's expression softened. "Whatever it is, we'll face it together." Ulric nodded, gripping the hilt of the emerald sword. "I'm grateful for that, but this road only gets harder. I don't know what we'll find or if we'll even survive." Bryn placed a firm hand on his shoulder. "Survival's not the goal, Ulric. Making a difference is. And we've already started." Her words settled something in his heart. Ulrich turned back to the stars, the weight of destiny no lighter, but his resolve unwavering. The emerald sword hummed softly at his side as if echoing his thoughts. The horizon called, and Ulrich knew they would answer, stepping into the unknown once more.